For more than 110 years, Mile High Academy has been a place where kids like me can learn, grow in faith, and make awesome friends. Everyone here is important, and teachers help us do our best in school and life. Come see what it's like to be part of our family. Visit milehighacademy.org or call 303-744-1069 to find out more. Mile High Academy, because you belong.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Generously. Today, we're going to be exploring the topic of evangelism. This topic is quite important, especially since this year, we're going through a North American church-wide initiative called Pentecost 2025. This initiative is allowing churches to create new opportunities and to proclaim the good news of the gospel. Now, within our Seventh-day Adventist context, we have seen different methods of evangelism, starting with tent meetings back in the 1800s, all the way to today with live streams and small groups. There are many ways of doing evangelism. But as one of my members always likes to say, if we don't do evangelism, we are going to truly not be relevant to our community. But when we do evangelism, we are able to reach out to the needs of the community. Now, to guide us through this conversation, we have Roger Hernandez from the Southern Union today with us to help us understand what actually is evangelism and who can participate. But more importantly, how can we understand evangelism in the 21st century? We're thankful for what you are about to hear, and we hope that it inspires you. To start our conversation today, I asked Roger, what is evangelism and what part of our church should be evangelistic?
Evangelism is just one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. So it's important because it feeds people, right? It helps people find their bread of life. So in a starving world, it's essential that you will be able to provide food. At its basic level, it's just sharing the story of Jesus so other people can fall in love with him and their life can be transformed. Evangelism is not an event we do when somebody has an initiative in a boardroom in Silver Springs. Evangelism is not an event we conduct once every 3 years or 5 years. Evangelism is not something we do where we invite people to come to church. Evangelism is the reason why we do everything. Right? Whether you have pathfinders, whether you have men's ministry, women's ministry, everything should be evangelistic. So the proclamation part, the easiest way for me to understand it is when you're courting a significant other, right? I.e. your wife, your girlfriend, or your boyfriend, or your future husband. Eventually, you go through a process. You don't meet them one day and say, hey, you want to get married? Because that would be really weird. And has that happened? Yeah. But if hold the check, I'm out. So you go through some courting process where you will share by yourself and you develop a connection. And at some point, if the relationship progresses, you have to go public with it. You go public. Your Facebook, your social media official, right? You're like, yeah, we've decided that we're going to enter this relationship. We're going to get married, or I'm dating this person. I'm now engaged. And I think evangelism is a part of the church in an imperfect illustration where you go public, where you've developed relationships and it's like, hey, there's this next step that you can go. It is a natural next step that you can go with Christ. Therefore, most of the components of evangelism are things that have to do with developing relationships with the community, an ongoing strategy, not drive-by compassion, where you go and give turkeys or turkeys once a year and feel good about yourself. That's the reason we connect with the community all year long as we exist, is because at some point they're going to ask why. And when they ask why, just like First Peter says, we need to be ready to give an answer to the faith that is in us.
As you heard Roger said, evangelism is not something that we do. is part of who we are. But many of us have been told or have been taught that evangelism is an event. Evangelism is during a season of the year. But what if we reframe that? What if we think in different ways? I asked Roger about this disconnect. What can we do to start thinking in a different way and maybe motivating people to see all of their activities as evangelistic activities? Most of the time, we have difficulty seeing this because, again, we have done it in a way that is event-based. So, what are some of the things that we can do to start thinking and projecting a different reality that makes our church family completely evangelistic?
Number one, you start talking about what you are. People usually live up to the expectation you have of them. Instead of saying nobody wants to volunteer, you celebrate the people who want to volunteer. So here's the big idea. The big idea is start with the ones who want to, and then build on those. Whatever gets talked about gets done. The issue with many pastors and churches is somebody gets up and say, "Hey, we're going to have this thing, and we need volunteers, and we're not having a good attendance, and it's all about the negativity of the things we're not doing and the stuff we should be doing, versus celebrating what is happening. No matter how dysfunctional your church, there's always healthy people. No matter how difficult your church, and like a daisical, or we already have enough people. Why do we want any more? There's always people who want to. Start with those and start talking about the good stories, about the positive stories, about the God-honoring evangelistic stories. And that's how you build. It's like, well, something's happened. Wow, look at the effect it's had. And look at whose kid came back to church. Maybe my kid can come too. Those 2 points are essential in moving your church forward. I used to be a local church pastor. I would start preaching about the 7 different models of evangelism and say, once evangelism is not knocking on doors. I'm the pastor and I don't like knocking on doors, but I love giving Bible studies. But my wife, who's a social butterfly, who's very extroverted, she doesn't mind. Some people can bake cakes. So my wife can knock on a door and invite them to a Bible study, which I'm going to give. You see how you involve somebody who will never knock on the door or give a Bible study, but they can bake a cake. So you have to ingrain in the people over and over and over, because vision leaks over and over and over. You don't stop what you're doing to do evangelism. You evangelize as a lifestyle. My job as a primary teacher and preacher is to, from the pulpit, say, here's how we do it. People are sitting down saying, if you say we have to be evangelistic, people are sitting down saying, yes, but how? So you have to be very, very specific. You don't say, well, we have to be evangelistic, and people are going to, in their mind, put 1 and 2 together, and then it's going to amount to 3, and I know what. You have to be very specific. Hey, how about taking the trash can from your neighbor and put it back? How about sending a little note to a coworker and encouraging them? How about, and just give clear examples, right? Pulpit presence, and then personal relationship. I believe in visitation. I think that's a lost art. It doesn't have to be in somebody's home, but the fact that you sit in front of somebody and start going through their personal trials, their personal worries, their aspirations, you'll glean a lot of information. It's like, I've heard you say that you like organized the parties at your job. Once a year we have this thing that we do with the kids, and it's called VBS. And would you be interested in doing? Not everybody has to volunteer every week. If some people will volunteer once a year, some people will volunteer once a month, some people will volunteer every week. But that happens in personal relationships. So I have to pulpit presence, and then I have personal relationship. And what's missing today is more the personal relationship, because pastors are like, I'm going to have my office hours. You can come and see me if you want, but I need to hit the streets. If I want to be able to move people, I have to minister to them before I can ask them to do something for the church.
I can wholeheartedly attest to the power of personal visitation. When you visit people, not just talking about pastors, but members to members, we developed connection, and that connection builds into trust. And when we have trust, then we can do things together because we actually are going in the same direction. So personal visitation has a lot of power. It can allow us to move the church forward as members and in collaboration with pastors and the conference as well. When we all know each other, when we empathize with the personal struggles, we can understand what is needed and actually start thinking in these evangelistic ways. One of the areas where our system is a little bit weak is just the reality that we are part of a sisterhood of churches. This can make us really strong in certain areas, but when we have 2, 3, 4 church districts, sometimes even 5, that pulpit presence can be a little bit diminished from the pastoral side. I asked Roger this question because it is part of the reality of a lot of churches, not only here in Rocky Mountain, but throughout the world. So how can we be on the same page together, not only with visitation, but also with what we share from the pulpit?
As a pastor, whether you're a pastor of a 1 church or a 3 or 4 church district, one basic principle that I followed and I saw my ministry change, and I've recommended it and teach and taught it to different people, and it's helped them, is that I want to dedicate 80% of my time with the top 20% of my leaders. You can teach what you know, but you can only reproduce who you are. So I want to spend time with my top leaders, whether it be a weekly Zoom call on Sunday mornings, whether it be, like every week I go by the same house. So I'm going to start developing in the people that preach, that do the preaching and teaching in my church. I want to ingrain in them this same thing that I'm passionate about. But if I'm not passionate, if I'm not giving Bible studies, if I'm just managing, the sheep and not going out for the lost one, I can only teach what I know, but I can only reproduce who I am, right? So when you start talking to them, spending time with them, you start seeing where the flaws are, where the weak areas are. And then you can do another thing that's significant, and it's just a small change, but it takes organization, is that you need to have a yearly sermonic calendar where you do team teaching. You have to have a yearly sermonic calendar, because if not, what happens in these little districts or little churches is that you preach one thing one Sabbath, and then the next week somebody starts talking about, the second coming of the Jesuits. And then the next week, somebody's talking about how pants in church or clapping brings in demons. And then you come back with a gospel center, and people are getting they're spiritually schizophrenic. But when you start doing team teaching, when we prepare the sermons together and you have the same thought process, and what's going on over here is going over here, you'll be able to move. It's going to be slow, but it's not going to be stopped. And we celebrate progress, man. We celebrate progress. If last year you had 1 person who said, I will help, and now this year you have 2, doesn't seem like a lot in a church of 50, but 2 is better than 1, and we celebrate that.
We're going to take a little break, and after we come back, we are going to continue diving deep into what makes churches successful in evangelism, and understanding that working together and having a plan together can truly enable us to reach more people. Thank you for listening to Living Generously. We'll see you after this short break.
At Campion Academy, every day feels like a new adventure. Whether it's diving into science, exploring the arts, or taking on leadership roles, there's always an opportunity to discover my passion and grow in my relationship with God. Plus, the friendships I've made here, they'll last a lifetime. If you're looking for a place to challenge yourself, have fun, and grow spiritually, Campion Academy is a place to be. Schedule a tour and see for yourself. Visit us at campion.net or call 667-5592.
We are back again with more Living Generously. And today, as we're exploring the topic of evangelism, I asked Roger something very interesting. So, a lot of the churches in North America are not multiplying. There are 4 different designations when it comes to churches: churches that are dying, churches that are stagnating, churches that are adding members, and churches that are multiplying. The majority of churches in the North American division are either stagnating or adding members. Very few of them are actually multiplying and becoming exponential in their communities. So I asked them, as he sees many churches throughout his travels, what are some of the principles or qualities that we see in the churches that are effective in evangelism and multiplying and becoming a greater presence in their communities?
In the 1% of churches that are effective, I see 4 consistent qualities that I think we should do a very practical thing. And they all start with C's because pastors love alliteration, right? Number 1 is curiosity. Good evangelistic churches are curious. We need to move from evangelism is me telling you how wrong you are to me being curious about what you're going through, so then I can point you to the right answers, who is Jesus, right? So I want to be curious. I want to ask, that's interesting. Tell me more. I'm interested in that. How do you get to that conclusion? I just want to ask questions. I want to become very curious. Curious of my culture. Curious of my environment. Curious of my town, of my city. Curious of different generations. Curiosity. The second one is close. I want to stay close. My wife broke her ankle, and she had told me because she was exercising. She said, when I'm exercising, I don't want any hugs. I want just, and when I'm cleaning the house, I don't want any hugs. Just more help, less hugs. Right? When I'm sweating and I'm cleaning, don't hug me. When I'm exercising, don't hug me. But there she was exercising, and she did a jump and broke her ankle. And she fell to the floor. And I was right there, and I got on the floor. I started hugging her. And she didn't say, haven't I told you? Haven't I made it perfectly clear? Haven't I? She allowed me to get close to her and hug her and help her, put her in a seat, take her to the hospital, wheel her around in a wheelchair. So here's my takeaway. Stay close to people until you hear a pop. Because eventually, there's going to be a pop. But I cannot be uncomfortable being close to people who are far from God. I have to make sure that I understand they, dudes have tattoos and they smoke weed and they don't smell like we smell and they eat what we eat and they drink beer in their barbecues. So if I'm not comfortable in that environment, I'm not going to be able to reach them. It's not that I'm going to participate of what they're doing, but I want to be close. The third one is compassion. It's not drive-by compassion. It's not what we do once a year when we give out toys in Christmas. It's a consistent, compassionate lifestyle where you're looking every day. How can I be of service today? How can I be generous today? Is that what a generous person would do? Is that what a generous person would say? Is that I want to be generous, right? I want to be compassionate to people, and I want to serve them. And eventually they'll ask why, because it's a very self-centered society. When you help others reach their goals, they'll ask, why are you doing this? And then the fourth one is Christ-centered. At the end of the day, I don't want to just make healthy sinners. I want to point them to Christ. Like, I think Penn, who's a avowed atheist, said, I'm not a Christian, but if you're a Christian, you don't share your faith. And he used a phrase, how much would you have to hate somebody to believe heaven is real and not tell them about it? How much would you have to hate somebody to believe the Bible is real and never say anything? So I had to ask myself, like, how much do I love people? How much do I hate people? So, we don't have to be super saved. We don't have to, if somebody loses their phone, it's like, what else is lost to you if you don't talk to Jesus? We don't have to be super saved, right? But we do have, as opportunities arise, share the faith that is in you. And if God's made a difference in your life, why wouldn't you want to talk about it? So those are the 4 characteristics of the 1% and practical stuff that you can do today to become a more evangelistic person and generous with your evangelism.
Now, at this point, you may be thinking, Roger, all of these C's sound really awesome, and I really want to do them in my life, but I'm afraid. I do not know how to be evangelistic in this way. I am afraid of being curious. I may be afraid to get close to people that I don't know, and I don't know their intentions. Or how can I be, Christ-centered? All I know is a little bit about the Bible. Maybe I'm very new to the church, and I don't know how to share my faith. There are a lot of things in this conversation, and I want to encourage you to listen to the following advice that Roger gives us to understand how you can start your journey of evangelism from your house. I think that as he shared these 4 beautiful principles that a lot of churches do as a whole, they stay close to people, they're curious, they're compassionate, and of course, they're Christ-centered. There's also something to be said about us preparing our hearts to be able to embrace these principles. Here's what he had to say and to recommend to us in order to become closer with Jesus and also more evangelistically minded.
I think a couple of things. Number 1, you go back to your prayer closet and ask for boldness, right? And number 2, ask for opportunities that are staring you in the face, but your fear does not allow you to see it. Those are 2 simple things to do. Just like, God, I want you to give me boldness. So the next time an opportunity arises, I'm not going to make it happen. But when it does happen, I want to have the boldness to speak into it. And then the third thing is you look and listen for people who are hurting. Those are the easiest people to have a conversation with. When somebody says, I'm going through a hard time right now, man, I can't stand my spouse. Man, this divorce is killing me. I'm really concerned about my finances. Those are people that you can start conversations with that will lead to conversations about Christ. So not every conversation, just because this is a big debate, right? Does a Christian song have to mention Jesus for it to be a Christian song? Well, if you look at the Bible, there's a whole book in the Bible that does not mention God or Jesus. It's the book of Esther. But the principles are there, right? You think you have to be very Jesus-y and to have that you're afraid because you think that you're not going to know the answers because you position yourself as here and then the people down here. But this is not we're journeying together. Just having a conversation with my friend, and it's going to come up. So start with developing relationships where you get to a point where you're comfortable enough that when you're asked, and it's going to happen, you're able to share your faith. Don't force it. Nothing happens forced.
There is one last area that I would like to explore with you today on this podcast, and that is the area of prophecy. So when we talk about evangelism, we cannot just disregard the idea and the importance of prophecy in our evangelistic efforts. So I asked Roger, what is the place of prophecy in evangelism, and how can we understand it for the 21st century?
Yeah, I think the purpose of prophecy is to show me what has happened, what is happening, and what's going to happen. At the end of the day, prophecy, I love the way somebody put it, is that Jesus wins and the ones who follow Jesus win too, right? That we know the end of the story and it ends well. So I love to share prophecy with people from that context because it's not a scare tactic. It's a security blanket. It's like, hey, whatever happens, isn't it awesome that Scripture already talked about it? And it's telling us, and because prophecy along the years, there's things that have been said that happened the way they were said. So whatever God said before and happened the way he said, what he's talked about now is going to happen like he's talking about now. So I don't have anything to fear. In an age where everybody's afraid of everybody and afraid of the other political party and afraid of what's happening in the streets and afraid of getting cancer and afraid of getting COVID and afraid of what, here's this prophetic vision that should encourage us, because the center of revelation is Christ. Christ, not the zoo, Christ. So from that perspective, prophecy is the blessing. It's not a curse, right? It's not a cuss word. It's not a 4-letter word. It's actually prophecy like 7 letters. So let's put it in its right place, and let's share it with joy and with the expectation that if God has been faithful in the past, He's going to be faithful in the future, and that's good news. One of the things that I practice for myself is 3 phrases that I tell myself all the time that you can apply to evangelism. Number 1 is do it. Done is better than perfect. Number 2 is do it now. It's like, well, the conditions are ready, because right now it's amazing what happens when you just do it and how things get worked out on the way. And number 3, do it before you're ready. You'll never get to a point where you are completely ready with everybody engaged in a church. Just, not to borrow Nike's slogan, but just do it. Imagine what joy will be when you get to heaven and you see that because you took a risk that God honors, because God honors that honoring risk, there are people in heaven because of your little church or your big church or whatever church you have. But just don't wait for anybody else to do it. You do it. And be blessed.
That has been our conversation for today on Living Generously. We are thankful that you got to listen to this, and we encourage you this year to think evangelistically, to be able to make it a part of your lifestyle, to be curious, to be close to people, to be Christ-centered, to be compassionate, to truly take this risk, to ask God for boldness, and to ask Him to make the opportunity available so that you can share your faith, maybe with a coworker or maybe a colleague or somebody that you know in your neighborhood that you see every day. Just ask God to fill those opportunities. And hopefully we get to see a lot of new people coming into the church and enjoying the blessings that God has given to us. Again, thanks for listening to this episode. If you found it insightful and you think somebody can benefit from it, make sure to share it with a friend. We are thankful because there are new listeners each week, so we need you to share it with somebody else. And also leave us a review on your app, whatever you're listening to this podcast. It also helps us to get out there and to get the message spread out to many more people. We hope that you are having a fantastic week and that your church gets to participate this year in some sort of lifestyle evangelism.
At Campion Academy, every day feels like a new adventure. Whether it's diving into science, exploring the arts, or taking on leadership roles, there's always an opportunity to discover my passion and grow in my relationship with God. Plus, the friendships I've made here, they'll last a lifetime. If you're looking for a place to challenge yourself, have fun, and grow spiritually, Campion Academy is a place to be. Schedule a tour and see for yourself. Visit us at campion.net or call 970-667-5592.